Thief. Security. Watch this woman. The accusation slices through the pristine silence of luminous jewelers. Heads turn, eyes narrow. Security guards advance. At the center of this storm stands April Williams, a 72-year-old former teacher, clutching a simple gold wedding band in trembling fingers. Her face, momentarily frozen in shock, shifts into something more complex, dignity wrestling with humiliation. "I've never stolen anything in my life," April says, her voice steady despite the earthquake inside her chest. The store manager smirks. "That's what they all say. What happens when your humanity is stripped away in an instant? When decades of respect, earned through teaching generations of children, vanishes because someone sees only your skin color, not your character? And what happens when that someone picks the wrong person to humiliate? 3 days later, that same manager will stand before the store's new owner, April's son, Anthony Williams, unaware that her actions have set in motion a reckoning that will transform not just a jewelry store, but an entire community's understanding of worth. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about something far more valuable than diamonds or gold. The price of dignity. Have you ever witnessed someone being judged unfairly based on appearance alone? Share your experience in the comments below. Welcome to Timeless Memoir, where today we explore how a simple accusation in a jewelry store exposed the hidden prejudices that shape our world, and the unexpected way one family chose to respond. April Williams stood before her bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her cream blouse. At 72, she dressed with the same care she had shown as an elementary school teacher, modest but dignified. Today was special. After 3 months of keeping her mother's wedding band in its velvet pouch, she was finally ready to wear it. She opened her jewelry box, a cedar chest her father had carved decades ago, and removed the small velvet pouch. The simple gold band slid into her palm, catching the morning light. Too small for her finger, but perfect for the woman who had worn it for 62 years. "Today's the day, Mama," April whispered, wrapping the ring carefully in her grandmother's handkerchief before placing it in her purse. The bus ride downtown gave April time to remember. Her mind drifted to 1963, when she was just 10 years old. "Mama, why's your ring so plain?" April had asked, comparing it to the diamond rings she'd seen in magazines. Eliza Williams smiled, twisting the simple band on her finger. "This ring carried your daddy and me through the cotton fields of Georgia, through marches where people spat on us, through nights when we had nothing but faith in each other." She took April's small hands in hers. "Fancy things get stolen, baby, but dignity? There's something they can try to take, but you don't ever have to give it up." "What's dignity?" young April had asked. "It's knowing your worth when the world tells you you're worthless," Eliza answered. "This ring reminds me every day." The memory faded as the bus reached downtown. April checked her purse one more time. The ring was secure, along with the $200 she'd saved for the resizing. Luminance Jewelers had been recommended by her church friend as the best in the city. Though April had noticed her friend's slight hesitation afterward, now she understood why. The moment April pushed through the heavy glass doors, the atmosphere shifted. 2 saleswomen who had been chatting animatedly fell silent, exchanging glances. A security guard near the entrance straightened, his hand moving subtly toward his radio. April had felt this before. The immediate assessment, the silent categorization. She'd taught her students about invisible barriers. Now she was walking through one. She approached the nearest counter, where a young white woman was arranging diamond necklaces. "Excuse me," April said with a warm smile. "I'd like some assistance, please." The woman glanced up, then past April as if expecting someone else. Someone will be with you shortly." She disappeared into the back room. April waited patiently, watching other customers enter. A white couple was immediately greeted with champagne flutes and guided to a private viewing area. A young Asian man in an expensive suit was shown watch collections without having to ask. After 7 minutes, April had counted. A different woman approached. Her name tag read, "Jane Ford, manager." "Can I help you?" Jane asked, her tone suggesting the opposite. "Yes, thank you," April replied, maintaining her teacher's composure. "I'd like to have my mother's wedding band resized." She carefully unwrapped the handkerchief, revealing the gold band. "She passed recently, and I'd like to wear it in her memory." Jane barely glanced at the ring. "We don't do repairs on non-store merchandise without proof of ownership." April blinked, confused. "It's my mother's wedding band from 1948. I doubt my father kept the receipt." "We have strict policies," Jane said, her voice carrying. "There have been incidents of people bringing in questionable items." The implication hung in the air. April felt heat rising in her chest, but kept her voice steady. "I assure you, this ring has been in my family for over 70 years. Jane's eyes narrowed. "It resembles a piece reported missing last week." The accusation, though indirect, was unmistakable. April noticed the security guards shifting closer. The white couple nearby paused their champagne sipping to watch. "That's impossible," April said, her heart pounding. "This was on my mother's finger until she passed in January." Jane picked up the ring with a tissue, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny. "Gold bands like this are common, without documentation." "Documentation?" April's voice finally betrayed her disbelief. "My mother wore this ring picking cotton in Georgia. She wore it marching for the right to be treated as human." "What documentation would satisfy you?" The store had grown quiet. Everyone was watching now. Jane placed the ring on the counter, not in April's hand, and reached for the phone. "I'm calling the police to verify this item." "You're calling the police on me? For bringing in my mother's wedding band?" April's voice remained controlled, though her hands trembled. "It's store policy when we suspect—" "When you suspect what, exactly?" April interrupted, straightening to her full height, the posture that had commanded respect from generations of students. "That I stole a simple gold band when there are diamonds worth thousands of dollars all around us? Or is it that you suspect anyone who looks like me?" Jane's face flushed. "Security, please escort this woman out. She's becoming disruptive." Two guards approached as customers backed away, creating a scene April had hoped never to experience at her age. In that moment, April faced the choice her mother had prepared her for all those years ago. Rage or dignity? The rage would be justified. The dignity was necessary. She carefully rewrapped the ring in her grandmother's handkerchief. "You lady," April said, her voice steady despite the humiliation burning through her. "I have never stolen anything in my 72 years. I taught children to read while you were learning your ABCs. I've seen this country change and stay the same in ways you couldn't understand." She placed the ring in her purse and turned to leave, pausing at the door to add, "My son will hear about this." Jane smirked. "I'm sure he will." As April stepped onto the sidewalk, the spring sunshine felt cold against her skin. The security guard watched until she was half a block away. Only then, in the shadow between two buildings, did April allow herself a moment of trembling. Not from fear or shame, but from a righteous anger that demanded action. She pulled out her cell phone, a gift from her son, and pressed his name on the screen. April Williams had spent a lifetime teaching children to stand up for what's right. Now it was time to show them how. Anthony Williams leaned back in his ergonomic chair, studying the solar efficiency reports on his tablet. His company, Williams Sustainable Energy, had just developed a breakthrough panel design that could bring affordable clean energy to underserved communities. The numbers looked promising. "Mr. Williams?" His assistant, Donnie, appeared at the door. "Your mother's on line 1. She sounds different." Anthony immediately set down his tablet. His mother rarely called during business hours. A respect for work she'd instilled in him since childhood put her through. When he heard her voice, Anthony knew something was wrong. April Williams had perfected the art of composure, but 45 years as her son had taught him to detect the subtle tremor that betrayed her distress. "Anthony, I'm sorry to bother you at work," she began. "You're never a bother, Mama. What's wrong?" "It's nothing serious," she said, the dismissal automatic after decades of minimizing her own pain. "Just a misunderstanding at a jewelry store downtown." "What kind of misunderstanding?" Anthony asked, already standing, already knowing. As April recounted what happened at Luminance Jewelers, her voice grew steadier, as if the telling itself was restoring her dignity. She described the incident clinically, like reporting a student's misbehavior to a parent. "They thought Grandma's ring was stolen," Anthony clarified, his free hand curling into a fist. "The manager implied it, called security, threatened to call police." A pause. "People were watching, Anthony, like I was a criminal." The controlled fury that rose in Anthony's chest was familiar. The same heat he'd felt when classmates called him names in the private school his mother had sacrificed everything to send him to. The same heat when investors had dismissed his business plan because they couldn't see someone like him running a tech company. "Which store was this?" he asked, his voice deliberately calm. "Luminance, downtown. But don't make a fuss, Anthony. I'm just upset because it was Mama's ring, that's all." But Anthony knew it wasn't just anything. His mother had taught third grade for 40 years, shaping young minds while enduring slights she never discussed. She'd raised him alone after his father died, working summer jobs to afford his college applications. She'd faced a world determined to diminish her with unwavering dignity. And now, at 72, she'd been publicly humiliated while trying to honor her mother's memory. "I'll handle it, Mama. Go home and rest." After hanging up, Anthony sat motionless for 30 seconds, breathing deeply. Then he pressed the intercom. "Donnie, clear my schedule for the next 3 days. Then get me everything you can find on Luminance Jewelers. Ownership structure, financial statements, recent sales history, sir, and call Diane in legal. I need her team on standby." Within hours, Anthony had assembled a war room. His team had discovered that Luminance was part of a regional chain owned by Radiance Holdings, a company facing cash flow problems after an overambitious expansion. "Their stock is down 28% this quarter," his financial analyst explained. "They're ripe for acquisition." But Anthony wasn't interested in just any business opportunity. He needed answers first. "I want to know if what happened to my mother was an isolated incident," he told the private investigator he'd hired. "Get me security footage, customer complaints, employee interviews, anything that shows a pattern." 3 days later, the evidence was overwhelming. The investigator had uncovered 17 documented incidents at that location alone, all involving customers of color. Complaints buried, employees who spoke up transferred or fired, a toxic culture emanating from management. That evening, Anthony sat alone in his office, reviewing the files. 2 paths lay before him. The first was public exposure. A lawsuit, media attention, the kind of scandal that would destroy the company and the manager who had humiliated his mother. It would be swift, devastating justice. The second path was more complex, more challenging, potentially more transformative. "Not revenge," Anthony murmured to himself. Reformation. His mother hadn't raised him to destroy. She'd taught him to build, to transform, to educate, to be better than those who underestimated him. By midnight, his plan was set. He contacted Radiance Holdings' desperate board with an offer they couldn't refuse. A complete buyout at 15% above market value, with conditions for immediate management restructuring. "Why jewelry?" his CFO had asked when Anthony outlined the acquisition. "It's completely outside our portfolio." Anthony had simply replied, "Some investments aren't about financial returns." 3 days after his mother had been called a thief, Anthony Williams became the owner of Luminance Jewelers. Not because he wanted to enter the jewelry business, but because sometimes justice required more than punishment. It required change from within. As he signed the final papers, Anthony thought about his grandmother's simple gold band, how something of such modest appearance could carry such profound worth, how value wasn't always visible to those who only saw the surface. The real work was just beginning. Jane Ford checked her appearance in the elevator's mirrored wall, smoothing her blazer and rehearsing talking points. The email summoning her to corporate headquarters had been vague. "Strategic discussion regarding your branch performance?" but rumors of a company buyout had been circulating for weeks. This was her opportunity to shine. 7 years managing Luminance's flagship store had yielded consistent profits despite the retail downturn. Her loss prevention metrics were particularly impressive. Shrinkage down 40% under her leadership. The elevator doors opened to reveal Radiance Holdings' executive floor, now bearing a new logo, Williams Enterprises. So the rumors were true. A buyout had happened practically overnight. "Miss Ford," a poised assistant greeted her. "Mr. Williams will see you now." Jane straightened her shoulders and followed the assistant into a spacious corner office. A tall black man stood with his back to the door, reviewing documents at a standing desk. "Mr. Williams, Jane Ford, downtown branch manager. It's a pleasure to meet you." She extended her hand with practiced confidence. When he turned, something in his expression made her hand falter mid-air. His eyes held recognition, but not the kind she expected. "Ms. Ford, please sit." His voice was measured, controlled. Jane took a seat, crossing her legs and opening her portfolio. "Thank you for this opportunity, Mr. Williams. I've prepared a comprehensive overview of our branch performance. Our customer retention rate among our premium clientele is industry-leading, and our security protocols have significantly reduced inventory shrinkage." Anthony remained standing, studying her with unsettling intensity. "Our target demographic appreciates the exclusive atmosphere we've cultivated," Jane continued, filling the silence. "I've personally trained our staff to identify serious buyers versus browsers, which has increased our per-transaction average by—" "How do you identify these serious buyers, Ms. Ford?" Anthony interrupted, his voice deceptively casual. Jane smiled. "Experience, Mr. Williams. After 7 years, I can read people. Their attire, their demeanor, their familiarity with fine jewelry. It's an instinct you develop." "An instinct," Anthony repeated, finally taking a seat across from her. 3 days ago, an elderly woman came to your store to resize her mother's wedding band. You accused her of theft." The blood drained from Jane's face as connections formed. "Williams, the old woman had said her son would hear about this. Sir, we have strict protocols for unverified merchandise. Elderly woman was April Williams." "My mother." Jane's portfolio slipped from her fingers, papers scattering across the polished floor. "Mr. Williams, I had no idea. If I'd known she was related to someone of your—" "Someone of my what, Miss Ford?" Anthony's voice remained calm, but his eyes hardened. "Someone of my status? My wealth? Is that the criteria by which you determine who deserves respect in your store?" "No, of course not," Jane stammered. "It was a misunderstanding. We'd had a theft report." "A simple gold band from 1948? Anthony raised an eyebrow. "Identical to one reported stolen last week? What an extraordinary coincidence." Jane's mind raced for an explanation, a justification, anything to salvage this catastrophic meeting. "Sir, I was simply following company protocol for unverified merchandise. If your mother had identification or documentation for a family heirloom?" Anthony leaned forward. "Tell me, Miss Ford, do you ask all your customers for documentation when they bring in family jewelry, or only certain ones?" The question hung in the air between them. "That's not... I don't..." Jane faltered. Anthony opened a folder on his desk. "But that's not why I'm here, Miss Ford." He slid the folder across to her. Inside were customer complaints, security footage stills, employee interviews, all meticulously organized and annotated. 17 incidents at your location in the past year, all involving people of color. Anthony's voice remained steady. Eleanor Washington, a neurosurgeon, followed by security throughout her visit. Donnie Adams, a law professor, asked to provide ID before viewing watches. Darius Johnson, a retired veteran, told items were out of his price range before he'd even inquired. Jane flipped through the pages, her defenses crumbling. These were isolated incidents, misunderstandings, patterns, Miss Ford, not isolated incidents. Anthony stood again, walking to the window. "Your store has the highest security intervention rate in the company, yet the lowest actual theft incidents. What does that tell you?" Jane stared at the evidence before her. seeing for the first time the cumulative weight of what she'd dismissed as protocol and instinct. I would never consider myself, she began. Racist, Anthony finished. Few people do. That's what makes bias so insidious. It hides in instincts and protocols and experience. He turned back to face her. You're not fired, Miss Ford. Jane looked up, confusion replacing fear. I'm not? No. That would be too easy. For both of us. Anthony returned to his seat. Instead, you'll be working with our new community engagement director to implement comprehensive bias training across all stores. You'll also personally oversee our new apprenticeship program for young jewelers from underserved communities. You want me to run diversity programs? Jane asked incredulously. I want you to face what you've been complicit in, Anthony replied. Firing you would allow you to paint yourself as a victim, find another job, and continue the same patterns elsewhere. I'm offering you something harder: accountability and growth. Jane's mind reeled. This wasn't the corporate meeting she'd prepared for. This wasn't about profit margins or sales targets. This was about something she'd spent a lifetime not examining. And if I refuse, she asked, her voice small, then you can explain to future employers why you left a company newly committed to inclusion. Anthony's expression softened slightly. But I don't think you will refuse, Miss Ford. Why not? Because despite your biases, you're someone who prides herself on excellence, on rising to challenges, on proving your worth. He gathered the scattered papers from the floor, handing them back to her. I'm offering you the chance to be excellent at something that actually matters. Jane sat silently, the weight of recognition settling over her. Not just recognition of what she'd done, but of what she'd been, what she'd allowed herself to become in the name of good business. The apprenticeship program starts in 2 weeks, Anthony continued, and my mother will be bringing her ring back to be resized. I suggest you begin your new role by helping her personally. As Jane left the office, portfolio clutched against her chest, she felt stripped bare. Not by humiliation, as April Williams had been, but by the sudden, stark illumination of truths she'd kept carefully shadowed. The elevator doors closed, and Jane caught her reflection again. The same polished exterior, but now she saw something else beneath it. Something that for the first time she couldn't simply dismiss or explain away. The real confrontation, she realized, wouldn't be with Anthony Williams. It would be with herself. 2 weeks passed before April Williams returned to Luminance Jewelers. This time, Anthony walked beside her, his presence both protective and purposeful. The store had already begun to change. New signage about the apprenticeship program adorned the windows, and the security guards, who had once shadowed customers of color, now greeted everyone with the same respectful nod. April paused at the entrance, her hand tightening around her purse where her mother's ring rested. As they entered, heads turned, not with suspicion this time, but recognition. Word had spread about the new ownership, though few knew the full story behind the acquisition. Jane Ford stood behind the main counter, her usual confidence replaced by visible apprehension. When she spotted April and Anthony, she straightened her shoulders and walked toward them. Mrs. Williams, Jane began, her voice catching slightly. I owe you an apology. April studied the woman's face, searching for authenticity beneath the professional veneer. Do you know why what you did was so painful, Miss Ford? Jane hesitated, clearly having prepared for a different conversation. I made assumptions based on... I didn't see you, the real you. When you've lived as long as I have, April said, being unseen is nothing new. But being seen as a criminal rather than not seen at all, that cuts deeper. Jane nodded, eyes downcast. My mother wore this ring, picking cotton and marching for the right to be treated as human, April continued, removing the ring from her purse. She taught me that dignity isn't given by others, it's carried within. But respect, that's something we all owe each other. April placed the ring on the counter. Now about resizing this band. Jane carefully picked up the ring with her bare hands this time, not tissue paper. I would be honored to handle this personally, Mrs. Williams. Would you like to see our options for the resizing? As Jane led April to a private consultation area, Anthony observed their interaction from a distance. This wasn't about humbling Jane or exacting revenge. It was about transformation. For Jane, for the store, for the community they served. Over the following weeks, Luminance Jewelers became the flagship for a new vision. The apprenticeship program launched with 12 students from diverse backgrounds, many from the same neighborhoods where April had taught for decades. These young people need more than opportunity, April had told Anthony when he asked for her input. They need mentorship, connection to their history, understanding of the artistry they're inheriting. To everyone's surprise, April volunteered to help with the cultural component of the training. Twice a week she arrived with historical artifacts and stories, jewelry from different traditions, pieces that had survived oppression, adornments that carried cultural significance beyond their material value. "This brass anklet," she told the apprentices one afternoon, holding up a simple piece, "belonged to a woman who escaped slavery in 1842. It's worth pennies in metal, but its value is immeasurable. When you create or sell jewelry, remember, you're not just handling precious metals. You're handling precious stories." Jane, initially skeptical about the program's impact on the store's bottom line, found herself increasingly drawn to April's sessions. She began arriving early, sitting quietly in the back, absorbing stories that challenged everything she thought she knew about value. "My grandmother had a cameo brooch," Jane shared hesitantly one day after class. "Nothing expensive, but she wore it every Sunday to church. I never understood why she chose that over her finer pieces." April smiled. "Did you ever ask her?" "No," Jane admitted. "I assumed it was sentimentality." "Perhaps," April nodded. "Or perhaps it represented something about her that the world couldn't see. Something she wanted to remind herself of every Sunday." These conversations continued beyond the classroom. Jane began consulting April about store displays, customer approaches, even hiring decisions. What started as obligatory inclusion evolved into genuine respect for April's perspective. The transformation extended beyond their relationship. Store policies changed. No more following customers, no more requiring proof of ownership for family heirlooms, no more assumptions about who could afford what. Staff underwent training to recognize and counter their biases. The security team was retrained to focus on actual theft indicators rather than racial profiling. Most significantly, the store began hosting community events, jewelry-making workshops for local schools, historical exhibits featuring pieces from diverse cultures, panel discussions about the intersection of art, identity, and value. Sales didn't suffer, as Jane had feared. They increased. The store attracted new customers who appreciated the inclusive atmosphere while retaining loyal clients who found the authentic engagement refreshing. One evening, Anthony visited to find Jane and April collaborating on a display of historical wedding bands from different cultures. "How's it going?" he asked. "I've been thinking about visibility," Jane replied, carefully arranging a simple brass band next to an ornate diamond ring. "How we choose what and who we value." She gestured to the display. "Each of these tells a story about love and commitment. Their worth isn't in their price tag." Anthony nodded, watching his mother gently polish a tarnished silver band. "I've learned more from your mother than any corporate training could teach," Jane admitted quietly. "She had every right to want revenge, but she chose education instead." "That's who she is," Anthony said with pride. "She taught generations of children to see beyond themselves. Now she's teaching you." April looked up, overhearing their conversation. "We're all teaching each other, Anthony. That's how transformation works. Not from the top down, but from the inside out." As customers gathered around the new display, April stood back, watching faces light up with recognition and curiosity. The store had become more than a place of commerce. It was becoming a place of connection. The simple gold band that had once been the catalyst for humiliation now symbolized something else entirely: how recognition of one's humanity could transform not just a moment, but an entire community. 6 months later, Luminance Jewelers closed early for a special event. The store had been transformed. display cases rearranged to create an open space where rows of chairs now faced a small stage adorned with flowers and a banner reading First Class, Luminance Apprenticeship Program. Families filled the seats, excitement buzzing through the room. In the front row sat April Williams, her mother's wedding band now perfectly sized on her finger. Beside her, Anthony watched with quiet satisfaction as 12 apprentices in matching navy blazers prepared to receive their certificates. Jane Ford approached the podium, no longer the defensive manager but a woman visibly changed by her journey. "Welcome to our first graduation ceremony," she began. "When this program started, I thought we were teaching these young people about jewelry. The truth is, they've taught us about value. Real value." As each apprentice crossed the stage, April pinned jeweler's certificates on young people who reminded her of former students. Some came from neighborhoods where fine jewelry stores were places they'd never felt welcome. Now they were craftspeople, designers, gemologists, their futures as bright as the diamonds they'd learned to appraise. The final graduate, a young woman named Desiree, paused to embrace April. "My grandmother would have been so proud," she whispered. "She used to tell me stories about being turned away from stores like this." April touched her mother's ring. "Your grandmother is here today, honey. In you." After the ceremony, as guests mingled over champagne and sparkling cider, April found a quiet moment alone by a display case featuring historical pieces. Her reflection in the glass overlaid the jewelry, her mother's ring catching the light alongside artifacts that had survived generations. "Mama would hardly believe this," she murmured to herself. "Which part?" Anthony asked, joining her. "All of it." April smiled. That her simple wedding band could start something like this. That a place that once made me feel worthless now feels like belonging. Anthony placed his hand on his mother's shoulder. "I bought this company thinking about justice. But you showed me something beyond that." "What's that?" "That true change isn't about punishment. It's about creating space for people to transform, if they're willing to see differently." Across the room, Jane was introducing an apprentice to one of the store's most elite customers, the young designer explaining her contemporary take on traditional African adornments, while the customer listened with genuine interest. "Look at that," April said. 6 months ago, Jane would have followed that boy around the store. Now, she's introducing him as an artist. Anthony nodded. "The most valuable thing in this room isn't in any of these cases." "No," April agreed, touching her ring again. "It never was." As the evening concluded, April stood with Anthony and Jane at the door, thanking guests as they departed. The three of them, once adversaries, now partners in an unexpected journey, represented something powerful, how recognition of one's humanity could be more precious than any jewel. Has someone ever stood up for you when you faced discrimination? How did it change you? Share your experience in the comments below. This story reminds us that dignity cannot be taken, only given away. And sometimes, the most powerful response to injustice isn't revenge, but reformation. If you found value in this story, subscribe to Timeless Memoir for more narratives that challenge us to see each other's humanity. Together, we're exploring how moments of injustice can become catalysts for transformation, one story at a time. Because, in the end, the true measure of worth isn't in what we possess, but in how we recognize the value in each other. At its heart, a simple black elderly woman was called a thief at jewelry store. Then her billionaire son bought it, explores the profound difference between dignity and respect. Dignity, as April Williams learned from her mother, is an internal quality that cannot be stripped away by others. It's the unwavering knowledge of one's worth, regardless of external validation. Throughout her life, April carried this dignity like her mother's ring, a simple but powerful inheritance that sustained her through decades of both subtle and overt discrimination. Yet the story also reveals a painful truth. There is a vast difference between being unseen and being seen as a criminal. For many Black Americans, particularly elders who have navigated changing forms of racism throughout their lives, this distinction cuts deeply. When Jane Ford accused April of theft, she didn't merely overlook her humanity. She actively criminalized it, transforming a lifetime of earned respect into public suspicion based solely on appearance. What makes this narrative particularly relevant is its exploration of how systems perpetuate bias without requiring explicit racism. Jane Ford never used racial slurs or admitted to racial prejudice. Her discrimination operated through protocols, instincts, and experience. The seemingly neutral language that often masks deeply rooted biases. The 17 documented incidents at Luminance weren't the result of overt hatred but of unchallenged assumptions about who belongs, who can be trusted, and who deserves the benefit of the doubt. Anthony Williams' response to this injustice demonstrates the power of education over punishment. Rather than simply firing Jane or publicly shaming the company, he creates a pathway for transformation, one that requires both accountability and opportunity. This approach recognizes that sustainable change cannot come through humiliation alone, but through the harder work of confronting biases and creating new systems that foster inclusion. The apprenticeship program becomes a powerful symbol of this philosophy. By opening doors for young people from communities historically excluded from luxury spaces, while simultaneously requiring Jane to examine her prejudices, Anthony creates an environment where transformation becomes possible for individuals and institutions alike. Perhaps most powerfully, the story challenges our understanding of value itself. April's mother's wedding band, simple gold without gemstones or elaborate design, carries worth that no diamond could match. It represents endurance, dignity, and the understanding that true worth lies in character rather than appearance or possessions. This message resonates beyond the specific context of racial discrimination in retail spaces. It speaks to how we all assign value, to objects, to experiences, and most importantly, to each other. When we judge worth based on surface appearances, we miss the profound stories, contributions, and humanity that lie beneath. The transformation of Luminous Jewelers from a space of exclusion to one of connection reminds us that recognition of our shared humanity is the most precious commodity of all, and that sometimes the most valuable things we possess are not things at all, but the dignity we carry within and the respect we offer to others.